Wendell Whitaker has requested that your main man mesmerize your mind with a mention of monks. Now, monks are that class that ever so remind us of that old song. Which one of these things is not like the other? Which one of these things just doesn't belong? Why do we have monks in Dungeons & Dragons? Why in AD&D First Edition did we get a class called monk that made no damn sense in the total of the other games? Sure, if your character classes are samurai and ronin and ninja, we can slide Kwai Jane Kane's bitch ass in there without a problem. However, when we're trying to have this European style of game, which is what Dungeons & Dragons initially is based on, sure, you can go off with all sorts of other ideas from that, but it's based off of predominantly J.R.R. Tolkien's work, which is very much European in its design. How are we going to slide Steven Seagal up in this movie with some elves? You're looking at it, you're like, come on, dude. You're like, well, dude, this just isn't going to work, brother. It's just ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. Sure, there's a great place for unarmed combatants. You can have the guy with the spike-studded covered cestices who has this gladiator background, who has this pancration style of training. That can be very interesting. With this Greco-Roman style, you can bring that, integrate that in to a character in a setting like that. However, that ain't what a monk is. A monk is like freaking E Honda. Bah, 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 bah. Yeah, that's flurry of blows, Bubba. When you're in a span of 6 seconds, you hit somebody 17.5 times. That's going to look a little wonky if you try to actually run down and think about what that's going to look like. That flurry of blows action at the higher levels, particularly when you start augmenting it in different ways, can really get out there. Plus, the monk is very highly structured. You're lawful, and you have all these other little things in there where you can't just make generic unarmed fighting style guy. If they had a class that was something based along those lines, and then monk was sort of like an option, kind of like a prestige class or a kit, something along those lines, it'd work fine. The same base tree character, right? The monk should not be the base tree character. The monk is like a prestige class, but I mean, something maybe you could get at first level. It's like an alternate abilities. You should be able to make a monk or that same guy I talked about with a studded fist, or you should damn well be able to make a pro wrestler bunkhouse stampede rules proceeding and creating that. I damn well tell you, when I make an unarmed fighter, you know somebody's getting press slammed, somebody's getting a flying shoulder, somebody might get a big elbow dropped on them, it might be a doctor driver. In fact, it will be all of those things, and perhaps continuously. There certainly will be someone getting powerbombed through something. That would just be rude if that didn't happen. Me and my group, we like that style of action. We like that style of cinematic combat that carefully utilized. Now, there's certainly some things that could come off very, very hokey and very goofy if you're doing that. But if you do it right, if you have that big monster style, 6.5 foot tall muscle man, pick somebody up and power bombs him, right through a table in a bar brawl, that's believable. If I saw that, I wouldn't be like, oh, that was a butt. In fact, quite honestly, I think that's a lot more interesting than your E Honda style over and over again. Oh, I did with kicks. That flurry of blows could get very interesting. Muay Thai plum elbows. It's kind of stagnant. With the monk, you're going to have a character that has always been hard to fit in a hole. Back in the day, they used to like to try to fit things in to one of those 4 classes. Monks have never been considered wizards, but damn if they haven't been considered the other ones. One of the groups, they're considered clerics, I believe. I think they're rogues. One of the versions, and then the 3.X line, I guess we'll call it. They're certainly in that fighter slot column, which is quite honestly more along the lines of where they always should have been. However, they're bizarre for fighters, like particularly early on in the AD&D First Edition. Boy, you were sucking. You were definitely get that ass whooped at first level as if you were trying to really be a fighter. It was a bizarre class. It certainly didn't seem to fit. It was definitely a case of trying to monkey with rules and, okay, well, we have this kind of system here. Let's tack this on and see if it works. They took it out in 2nd edition. Yeah, it kind of brought it back a little bit, like in his own little book. But that was just to sell another book. Like the Barbarian, it's just an idea to say, well, this didn't really work that well. But if you want it, here it is. Pay us a little bit more for that, and you can have it. So, my thoughts on the monk. It doesn't really work if you're building a game that's kind of like the scientist. If you hadn't thought about having scientists in your game, and someone's like, I want to play a scientist. You're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Where would a scientist even be? How would you even have a scientist? It doesn't make any sense for the culture here. You can't just throw monks in. It's like, well, we're the Temple of Thander. There's a bunch of monks. Like, no, they're not, dude. Those monks would not have been at the Temple of Thander if you didn't need this. And when you have stuff like that, it starts becoming very difficult to suspend belief. It becomes ridiculous, and monks can cause that ridiculous factor. Like I said, for me, the class should be something like unarmed combatant, right? If you want to make a monk, here's the ways you spend your feats to get a monk, or you buy character points out to get a monk. If you want to play, a bare knuckle gladiator or a boxer, you could go with that. If you want to play someone that's like a Greco-Roman style wrestler, or a Sambo style wrestler, or a professional catch-can power bombing people type, you certainly do that. And I've had so much fun and entertainment value with myself and people in my groups playing professional wrestler style of fighting characters. Where you're picking people up and you're slamming them to the ground, you're throwing them off the high vantage point, you're leaping up in the air and dropping a knee on somebody's head, you're picking up whatever kind of objects you use around. And when you have a character that really uses scenery, you're like, oh, there's a tree over there, I'm going to jump off it on that guy with fearlessness. Oh, there's a tree over there, I'm going to take him and slam his face directly into it. When you're bringing that style of not having a weapon, it can really entertain a game master. When you have a game master sitting there stagnant, everyone else is sitting there, oh, I rolled a hit. And then I'm coming up with something new, something different, something fresh, and stimulating every round. I've had I only try to do it with a game master that kind of understands what I'm going for. It kind of goes with it. But even when earlier in my life, when I didn't really quite have everything honed out in that formula, I've never found a game master that wasn't all about it. When I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do this and this and this. And they're like, oh, well, I don't know what kind of damage I should do. I say, well, dude, just tell me whatever dice you want me to roll. I don't care. And they're like, okay, well, that's pretty cool. Why don't you roll a D8 on that one? Okay. I'll roll a D8 for my damage. I don't give a damn. Where, you can put some particularly interesting things together when you have that style of fighting. And I suppose you can with a monk, but overall it seems kind of repetitive. I've never really seen anyone play a monk that kind of blew me away, and a flurry of blows gets rolled after a while. It's like if you have a fighter and you're doing the same thing over and over, you're hitting somebody with that long sword. We were talking about that long sword before I went in, but you only got to do it a couple times around. This monk is doing it like twice as many times. So I was like, oh man, it gets used up and boring even faster. I'll do the open hand shot. Half the time the people I'm playing have no idea about martial arts. Like, I have a martial arts background. I know a lot about martial arts. So, even with that, I find the monk to be a character that doesn't really fit in most fantasy games. I certainly don't think they make any sense to put a monk as a base, right in a base book. There's a lot of types of classes I could recommend putting in a base book above a monk. So I don't know why a monk gets special treatment. I don't know why a monk would be the baseline for an unarmed fighter. Here's the problem with making it the baseline is it has so many things that make it orderly, that make it a monk. It's like, well, okay, I'm gonna make a pro wrestler type character. How do I do that? Oh, I don't know. You sure as hell can't use a monk, because you're like, okay, well, I get the unarmed combat, I get this, okay, I'm good to go. Oh, wait a minute. What about this still mind and perfect body? None of this stuff makes a damn bit of sense. These skills are wrong. So it creates a problem. It's not where I can just swap one or two little deals out. It's like you have to kind of gut it from the floor up, and it limits the amount of concepts. When you have a class, you want to have as many concepts as you can. Like you could work a ton of concepts on to a fighter. A fighter, really, honestly, could cover so many types. You don't need a ranger or a paladin, a barbarian, a swashbuckler, a pirate. You don't need any of those. Every single one of those, a samurai, a street fighting type guy. All of those could really, honestly, be covered under a fighter if you have a good system of feats. Basically, you need to have a better deconstructed system than say 3.5 had. But the fighter archetype itself kind of perfectly covers all of them. Of course, again, to do that, and again, you could probably do that and just have the monk be a part of the fighter branch, But I guess that loses a bit of appeal, because if you've already covered everything right off the gate, you have less spot books that you can make. You have less ideas that you can put down. So I kind of understand why they wouldn't want to do that in a way as well, for that monetary reason. Now, when you have that monk, though, it just is so limited. It's like, you're a monk. You don't have nearly as much leeway. Let's look at a cleric, for example. A cleric, just like a fighter, man, you can do almost anything. You could have a badass warrior cleric, or you have a guy like sits back there and he's very knowledgeable, very intellectual, very articulate, but he can't handle himself, comport himself on a battlefield at all, because it's going to vary by god, and then inside the god, they're going to have tons of variance as well, whether you're going right or left with them. So it can be very, very broad. Lets you do a lot of things with them, which I like. With a monk, I'm not going to say, okay, you have one or two ideas, but the number of ideas is pretty shallow, even in comparison to something like a barbarian, which quite honestly is a little lacking on depth in terms of the amount of character concepts you can create with a barbarian. I can come up with dozens of them that are different from lamentations of the women. I can do quite a few more things besides that with a barbarian. Some very different. But I think a monk, of all the base classes in the book, I think it's the tightest in terms of what conceptually you can do with a monk. I think that monk itself really should be a concept under some sort of unarmed warrior type of character. For me, again, I know in the 3X line I've never played one. I had a player play one once, and it was kind of it. I had, I think maybe in AD&D at some point I tried it, but never for any character that stuck, any game that stuck, anything that was, that meant something. Of course, the majority of you out here have been doing this for a long time. I played a lot of characters that honestly didn't mean anything, because the game didn't mean anything. It might have been a great character concept or design, or it might not have been, but, when the game last 1 or 2 game sessions, and they weren't particularly notable, or maybe even fun, that's a character that's not particularly important. The monk, overall, definitely, to me, gets a low grade. They're difficult to work in when you have players. When something's in the base book, players have this entitlement mentality to it, unfortunately. But don't be afraid to tell your players, no, son, you're not playing a monk in my game. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. Where would you come from? Why would you be here? No, you didn't wander from 9 continents away, dude. You're not first level when you've done something like that. You need to start somewhere around this area with something that culturally makes sense. The being able to apply to be part of the Game Master's world, of the framework. You should be part of that living, breathing framework, not something that's like an alien body. You understand? You're not like the piece of virus in there getting hit by all the white blood cells, man. You need to be flowing right down the chamber like everything else. You don't need to stand out from something that makes sense. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't have a character that is very different. It's like the far limits. Like, oh yeah, I mean, in this area there do be lizardmen. It's like, well, I want to be a lizardman. Oh, all right. But in this area, do there be lizardmen martial artists? That can kind of get ridiculous. And for some reason, a lot of times, recently people are talking about drow as martial artists. What? Why would drow possibly be martial artists? It doesn't make any sense. Drow ninja. Oh my God, not my damn game. Definitely a different idea. I'm sure that probably started somewhere on maybe a World of Warcraft or something like that. But it sounds worse than Drizzt Do'Urden. I'll tell you that right now. So, and yes, I know, Urkels, I owe you a video on the drow, and the drow will be video addressed as well. It takes a while to knock out these videos. But here's my thoughts on monks. Monks, pretty much, not the cold concept of monk I'm not going to get with. At most, I might grab a couple levels of monk and try to make it a pro wrestler. That's pretty much what I'm going to do. If you know what's good, you will know what's good with a press slam. And coincidentally, earlier on we kept trying to work grapple. Like we said, oh, well, grappling, that's how you actually slam somebody, right? Apparently a body slam, and as far as I could tell from having studied through the rules in AD&D, in Dungeons & Dragons, third and 3.5 is trip. To body slam someone is a trip. But it's a problem because that doesn't damage somebody. But it's like a damaging trip. So I had actually just made a whole new feat for that. The body slam feat. You know what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? Because you can just slam somebody to the ground. They are tripped. It triggers all those same things. And then again, the old standby. I pick him up and throw him at those two guys. Trust me, that one happens a lot. No rules in Dungeons & Dragons address this. I have looked and looked and looked. They simply do not address it. So that's something I've had to handle. Because again, it comes up. It comes up a lot. So when you have a situation like that, just roll with it. Just roll with it. Say, don't worry about the damn rules, attacks, opportunity, foolishness. Roll with it. Put yourself fluidly in the moment. That can be pretty interesting. If I'm having like a lizard man thrown at me, my first reaction is like, aha, damn opportunity. It's like, oh, duck, cover, move, roll, run. I want to defend myself. I don't want 372 pounds of lizard man crashing down on my nugget, son. Nor do you.